Good evening to everyone that's able to make it out. Kind of know what Noah felt like when the sun come out after all the rain today. So we're blessed there. This evening, what I want to take a little time, we're going to read over in Genesis 19. That's going to kind of be it's going to be the longest reading for this evening. What we want to talk about are the follies of Lot, the chain of events that unfolded for Lot and his family, the chain of events that took him through the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. But we want to keep in mind when we read this that Lot did not have the Old Testament. He didn't have the New Testament at this time. He didn't have either one of those to help guide him. So before we start beating on Lot too hard and heavy, because after I read this and was thinking I was done ready to kick Lot. But what we want to look at is what unfolded for Lot and his family. And we don't want to start that chain of events. And we're going to kind of go through this chapter, hopefully understand it. We know also that over in Genesis 13, 9 through 11, it speaks of how Lot came to this chapter 19. It speaks of how he and Abraham were together. Their flocks were having problems and the herdsmen in them. So Abraham did not want any problem between he and Lot. So he said, please, you got the east and the west, you pick. Pick where you want to go, and I'll go the other way with my flock. So Lot had the choice. And Lot picked the Jordan Valley, which it was rich with green grass, good for the flocks, the herds. And what I want you to think about is, was Lot thinking of his flock only? No, I think he was thinking of prosperity for himself, for his family. But it's easy to lose sight of the prosperity we should be striving for, which is prosperity spiritually and for our souls, for our family souls. And it's easy to get caught up with this is going to be so much better for us, and we have the pick of either direction. So I'm going to go over here, and all he had to guide himself by was his conscience of good and evil that come about from the Garden of Eden. And he was somewhat yoked. He was a nephew to Abraham, who we know was the father to so much throughout the Bible, so he was close with God. Anyway, so when we read through this, kind of pick out on those things that come about, and we're going to try to understand better so that for ourselves we don't make these mistakes. So in 19 verse 1, says here, and there came two angels to Sodom at even. And Lot sat in the gate of Sodom, and Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, behold, now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet. And ye shall rise up early, and go on your ways. And they said, nay, but we will abide in the street all night. So Lot, in the beginning here, he recognizes this godly authority in these two angels that are coming in. So he has not been, his vision of righteousness in others, he can see that. And he sees that these are some righteous beings coming towards him that are coming in. And he's wanting them to come on in. And get this, he knows what town they're coming into. He knows the state of affairs in Sodom and Gomorrah here. They said, nay, but we will abide in the street all night. Well, they had already told Abraham previously that they're coming in there to see, to take account of what's going on. So verse 3, and he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and entered into his house, and he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot and said unto him, Where are the men which came in to thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. So these people there are bringing about their wicked ways to try and influence this on these guys. And when I say influence, we know what's going on here. It's not a good state of affairs. But I want you to keep in mind as we read down through here, even these people recognized that these men, there was something different. Verse 6, and Lot went out at the door unto them, and shut the door after him, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Behold, now I have 2 daughters, which have not known men. Let me, I pray you, bring them out to you, and do to them as it is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing. For therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. So he's trying to protect these men of God, and he's trying to swap sin for sin. Here's problem number 2 in what we read. The first problem is he picked to pitch his tent here, facing Sodom. Then he ends up, as we read this, it comes about that he's living in this city, and he has brought his family in here. Now he's willing to swap sin for sin, his daughters, to protect these angels of God. Verse 9. And they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fella came in to sojourn. That means to stay just a little while. And he will needs be a judge. Now we will deal worse with thee than with them. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. So in verse 9 there, they recognize that one of these guys is here to take account of what's going on, to judge them, to bring back what he has seen, to make sure that whenever they destroy this, they were right in it. So they're being judged in these actions. They recognize this. They turn their nose at this, the people of Sodom. We think, how could they do that? We have people that are changing the gender of their children at young age. How can they do that? Man is man. It's been that way for years, and they refuse. So, verse 10. But the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house to them and shut to the door. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. And the men said unto Lot, hast thou here any besides son-in-law, and thy sons, and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord hath sent us to destroy it. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. So his sons-in-laws are laughing at him to his face, and we see that nowadays as well. We want to keep in mind, I don't know what happens to these sons that it talks about in verse 12. But the angels said unto him, hast there any besides son-in-law, and thy sons, and thy daughters? So I'm going to say that he had some sons there as well, plus the daughters that were married, plus the 2 daughters that were young and unmarried. We just kind of keep that in mind because we're going to see that some of those are not going to be in the picture later. Verse 15. And when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters, which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him. And they brought him forth and set him without the city. So Lot is dragging his feet and getting out of here. He's dragging his feet because he's going to have to leave behind some family members. And he don't want to leave your family behind. So they hurry up and rush him out. And he gets his 2 daughters, but they are not of age to think for themselves, is what I would assume here by this. They grab them because they're in his household. and his wife and get them out of there. And it came to pass when they had brought them forth abroad that he said, Escape for thy life, look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And Lot said unto them, O, not so, my Lord. Behold, now thy servant hath found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life, and I cannot escape to the mountain, lest some evil take me and I die. It's problem number 3 for Lot, that he didn't trust in the Lord. He just told us right there in 19 that he admits that they saved his life, but now he's worried that they're going to throw him into some peril. Behold now, this city is near to flee unto, and it is a little one. O let me escape thither. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. And he said unto him, See, I have accepted thee concerning this thing also, that I will not overthrow this city for thee which thou hast spoken. Haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything till thou be come thither. Therefore, the name of the city was called Zor. So Zor was one of 5 cities, if my mind's doing right in my history research, that were all kind of there down at the Jordan Valley. The sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zor. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities, that which grew upon the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. I'm sure his wife was worried to death about her kids that she left behind. And as I stop on these few things going through here, we'll keep those in mind, because as we read some scriptures, you can kind of plug them into these spots a little later. But his wife looked back, and she was turned to a pillar of salt. And that was it for her. So the chain of events that has been unfolding has consumed his wife as well. You know, would his wife have looked back if he had not pleaded with those angels and just went on into the mountain? If he hadn't questioned God and where God was trying to lead him, would his wife not have turned back? Would she have stayed strong with him? I don't know. And Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord. And he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the plain, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham, and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in the which Lot dwelt. So we know that back over in the previous chapter that Abraham is, Lord, peradventure, if there be 50 righteous souls, would you still destroy? And you know, they went through this. But Lot was the only one that they could find that was worthy of not being destroyed. And Lot went up out of Zor and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters with him. For he feared to dwell in Zor, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. So Lot, if you try to think through his mind right now, he's a nervous wreck, I'm pretty sure. He has lost half of his children, at least half. He's lost his wife. He's in a city that he asked to be in. Now he's not in that city because he's worried about it, something happening. I'm sure he's worried that the spark's going to jump over there to it too. He may have got there and looked around and said, this city isn't that much better. Maybe it is a little, but I don't want to start over here. I'm going to get on up to the mountains where I was told to go in the beginning. So, and they made, let's see. And Lot went up out of Zor and dwelt in the mountain, he and his 2 daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zor, and dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. And the firstborn said unto the younger, Our father is old, there is not a man in the earth. So we go about and we read this, and I'm going to try to condense some of this because I have a lot more scriptures. But his daughters go on to get him drunk. All right. I don't know. We've heard of this, getting somebody drunk. Did they sneak it to him? I'm sure that he could taste it. I don't know. But his daughters have lived in this filthy city, And now they're taking it under their own advice to get their dad drunk, to lay with him, to keep the family name going. Sin for sin again. So that's kind of the text. It was kind of a long text for where we're getting going here. But we want to keep in mind as we studied this that, Lot didn't have the Old or the New Testament to guide himself by. We have that. We don't have the excuses. Lot seemed like a weak individual. Seemed like he lacked in some wisdom, for sure lacked in some good decisions. But he didn't have this Bible that we have to help guide us, to help strengthen us daily, to help preserve our decisions for us and our families. And the big thing that I want us to understand is the decisions we make affect everyone around us. The decisions we make affect our wives, our children, where we lead them to. Our children can make decisions that are going to affect us. So you think of that, children, kids, young ones, especially teenagers, which you're at the age where us parents wring our hands worrying about you whenever you go somewhere. The decisions that you make in your life, if you make a bad decision and end up in a bad car wreck because you got in a car with somebody you shouldn't have been with, what is that going to do to your family? Yes, we are responsible for what we decide to do in this life. But a lot of things that we endure could have been headed off. A lot of the things that the family of Lot endured could have been headed off if Lot had not chose to pitch tent looking at Sodom and Gomorrah and to eventually move in there. I don't know where his thoughts were on that. So, Lot was looking with his eyes. He was looking with his eyes at the money. If you would, turn over to Proverbs 16, verse 20 through 21. He was looking at all the money. That was where his wisdom was coming from. That's where he was trying to be wise. How much better is it to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding rather to be chosen than silver? The highway of the upright is to depart from evil. He that keepeth his way preserveth his soul. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Better is it to be of an humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. He that handleth a matter wisely shall find good, and whosoever trusteth in the Lord, happy is he. The wise in heart shall be called prudent, and the sweetness of his lips increaseth learning. Sometimes we end up in a predicament. Sometimes we end up in a spot that we didn't foresee coming. Hopefully we can foresee it. But once we see this spot that we're in, it's hard, but we need to get out of it. Lot drew closer to it. I'm sure he's being persuaded by his family. That's where we need to end up being. That's where we need to go. Maybe the family wanted him to go there to get closer to the sons-in-laws, that part of the family. I don't know. But we have to be careful. We have to weigh our actions that we're going to take by God's word. Over in Timothy, 1 Timothy 6 and 11, but thou, O man of God, flee these things and follow after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, meekness. If we take these things that he's telling us to follow after, and we allow these to be the ruler, the tape measure for our actions, we stand a much better chance of not ending up in a spot that we don't want to be like Lot was. There again, Lot didn't have this, but we do. And in that, if we have this, we're not going to have as much, well, I didn't know on the day of judgment. Matthew chapter 8. Matthew chapter 8 and verse 26. And he saith unto them, why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. So what I'm getting at here in this was whenever Lot was so fearful of where God was trying to lead him when he got out of there. What about us? You know, he tries to lead us. We get scared because of the storms. We get scared because of the things that are going on, and we let it shake our ground that we stand on. We can't do that. We have to keep our faith strong. We don't want to be counted as one of little faith. Also, back at where we read earlier over in Proverbs, it talks about trusting the Lord. What about Lot's wife? Did she trust in the Lord? Over in Proverbs 16 and 20. We got to put our trusting in the Lord. We got to allow him to do what he has set about to do to lead us. You know, he has said, Jesus, when he was here, the Lord doesn't want to suffer anything to happen to us. He loves us. Why would he let anything happen? John 12 and 5. 12 and 25. John 12 and 25. John 12, verse 25. He that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. Maybe Lot's wife looked back because she was looking back for her kids. It'd be hard not to look back. But many times our kids make decisions. And we have to let them take that road that they have chosen to take. Not that we're not worried about them. Not that we don't love them. But we can't let that drag us and the rest of the family down. There again, where would Lot's two daughters have been that did make it out of there? Would they have chose differently if Lot's wife hadn't have looked back than to have laid with their father? And we're going to see what that brought about in a minute. But Lot's wife would have been there. The problem that they were trying to curb would not have come about. The family name could have continued. They could have built the family again, but she looked back. She had a little faith. She was worried about what was behind her. Sometimes our loved ones get behind us as we want to look back. We want to turn back to them. We love them and we talk to them. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is we can't get wrapped up in that again. So let's turn over, if you would, to Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7. So we're going to talk a little bit about the problems that went on after they made it into the mountain. You know, over in verse 32 and 34 of Genesis that we were reading, that goes on to talk about everything that happened, about how his daughters got him drunk 2 nights in a row. They ended up conceiving children from him. You know, sin for sin again. Sin for sin again. Matthew chapter 7, verse 17 through 18. Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. What I'm trying to compare this to is sin for sin. You can't have sin correct sin. We have to be a good, blooming, fruitful tree. Remember Jesus, how he caused the fig tree, I believe it was, to wither because it didn't produce fruit. We have to be fruitful, and good fruit is going to come from what we were just reading about, serving God and living for him. What did this fruit bring about? Well, the 2 daughters, they had 2 sons, Moab and Benami. Moab became, from my readings, the head of the Moabites. Benami, Ammonites. And what was the lineage of them? What did they give down the road? What did this sin that produced up in that mountain give? they were enemies of God. That's what sin begetting sin will get us. That's what not putting our faith and our trust in God will get us. That's where our family's going to be. Are we creating a family lineage of continuing to follow God, or are we creating a family lineage that walks away from God? Now, you can't make everyone adhere to it, just like we saw over with the son-in-laws. The daughters stayed with the son-in-laws. We can't make the kids do, but we can be the good, fruitful tree. We can be the one that leads them to a path of righteousness, if they'll follow. Seems like Lot lacked some wisdom. You know, I'm going to wear this out, but we have the New Testament. We have the Old Testament. We have all these problems that people had that we can draw knowledge from. We can get wisdom. 1 Corinthians 1. 1 Corinthians 1, 19 and 20. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and will bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this world? Hath not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? You drop to 27. But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. You know, that whole chapter there is a wisdom chapter. But this world is, we say that it's off the rails, but we have so much TV, phones, we have so much internet that we can see everything going on. Things have been rolling pretty bad for a while, since I'm pretty sure God's done destroyed the world completely, save Noah and his family. Now cities, save Lot and his daughters. You know, it's a progression that man goes through. And God is continually, up to Jesus, trying to fix us, so to speak. He's not going to make us, but he's trying to set about a fix for us. And we have the greatest fix there is now, and that is Jesus, our Savior. You know, in verse 25 there in the same chapter, it says, because the foolishness of God is wiser than man, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. You know, so many people snub their nose at God, and they want to go about with their own wisdom. I say that, people. I'm one of those sometimes. I'm one of those sometimes. I think everybody in here is. You get caught up in what's going on and you want to, oh, this is a good deal. This is a good thing. This is what I'm going to do. This is what we're going to do. You haven't tried it by the word yet, have we? You have to. So over in Mark 8. Mark 8. Mark 8, 34 through 38. And when he had called the people unto him, with his disciples also, he said unto them, whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's, the same shall save it. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? Whosoever therefore shall be ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him also shall the Son of Man be ashamed, when he cometh in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So we know that Jesus is here for us. And this, as I stand up here and talk to everyone, everybody I see here that's of age, I know is a Christian. So here's the last thing I want to leave us with. And I want us to think about this as we go through our day coming up. Over in 1 Peter 1 and 13, we're told to gird up the loins of your mind. You know, in our daily battles, And if you look at all of the people that used to battle back in those times, they had things, armor, that they had to strap on. You would run a little bit and it would get loose. You'd have to stop, readjust, get it tightened up. We need to do the same daily to our conscience. We need to do the same daily for our family's well-being. We need to evaluate. We need to give ourselves self-judgment so that we don't end up in the spot that Lot was in. I've talked longer than I hoped that I had. We don't know the hearts and minds of those here. We don't know if someone's in a predicament that they need prayers, that they need help. If you do, we ask that you'd come forward as we stand to sing the song that's been selected.